Gambia or Ghana. A lot of Nigerians send their children to Ghana for read medicine. How many universities do you have in Ghana? Maybe about 4 or 5. How many universities do you have in Nigeria? Almost 100. But Nigerians send students to Ghana. Why? Because there's something that is wrong, so to say. That does not mean if you want to go to Ghana, you can't go. So, because they send students to Malaysia does not mean that the Maritime Academy is not, the Oron does not have the capacity to take, Nigeria is 160 million, with only one Maritime Academy. It's not possible. We are the 8th largest producer of oil. We have more than maybe 200 offshore support vessels with a crew of about 10. So 200 by 10, that is 2,000. 2,000 crew. If all the crew are Nigerians, then on and off. When 2,000 are on board, 2,000 are off. So that's 4,000. Now if you put the tankers, the CSVs and the coastal tankers, it's more. So there's definitely capacity problem. And that's what we are trying to close. So because you send students to Philippines doesn't mean the Maritime Academy, that is not the issue. The issue is that we need more spaces. The space we have in Oron, it is not enough, we agree. The facilities on the ground cannot take more students than we're already taking. Unless you just want to be patriotic and send all the students there anyway. We have a center in Oron, GMGSS center in Oron. I go there, I see the facilities. I think you guys know Captain Sota, right? Captain Sota is my classmate, or was my classmate. We employed the same day, 1st September 1975, to UK to read masters, or to read, to be tech cadets. He was the head of one of your departments. I was in Eket. I worked for Mobo. I left Mobo after 15 years last year, not left, in quote. I'm on leave on absence. So we're Oron to, it's only 20 minutes. So on Saturdays I drive there, and we have Okore, we have Olabi, they're all there. So I go around the school, I know the facilities you have. So I can tell you how many students the school is supposed to take. But I can't come as well because I'm patriotic, send all the 2,000 cadets or 500 cadets we are employing to Oron, because somebody will say, oh, because you go to Philippines, that is not the issue. Whoever tells you, explain to him, the school can only admit so number of students. Wherever he comes from, ask him, the Maritime Academy in his country, how many students were they employing per year? So he can't tell you that you should put it all in one place because he wants to build confidence. That's not the issue. You explain. Somebody makes a comment, sit him down and explain to him. Say, look, this is a situation, this is what we are trying to do. Oron can only take so number of students. We need to train more. So the balance, the SS, is the one we are sending to those locations. That's how it works. And let's hope we work together and then move this country. See, training cadet is not rocket science. It's not rocket science. You go to school, you pass, you go to sea, you come back, you write your exam, you pass, you are in. And then if you want to move forward, you go to sea again. I don't know what I do this, but that's what you used to do. After second mate, you go back, you come back first mate, you go back, and you are masters. That is what we should do. Not just piling everybody up. And then we are going to create problem in future. I think, thank you very much.
Captain Nagabal, we're so pleased you're here today. And in case you were wondering whether you were getting your money's worth of being here, I think that's the demonstration that we needed. And a very powerful, passionate, robust summary of the issues that are faced. The whole point of a conference like this is to give us the opportunity to debate these things and take the opportunities as they arise. And let me try to summarize that so that we can move on by saying it's clear you have a capacity problem, which is a problem because of growth, and growth, of course, is a good thing. So these are positive issues that Nigeria needs to address. When it comes to training, you want to turn out the best people. And if you want to turn out the best people, your lecturers need to be recent seafarers. They need to be up to date with the latest technology, such as ECTIS on charts and the new designs of tug with that azipod steering. And so your lecturers need to be able to train your students in the latest technical issues. And so if you have a capacity issue or you have a knowledge issue, it's make the most of those universities that can train your people to the highest level. It's about turning out people that will be world class. Clearly, Nigeria needs some help in extra capacity for its universities. We've talked about private-public partnerships. There are a lot of good ideas around, and hopefully things will move forward both in terms of the traditional maritime industry and in terms of partnerships with the oil and gas sector as well. So a very good debate. Thank you very much indeed, sir. I hope they fly you back first class as a consequence of your input. Now, let's move on, and he's been very patient, and his glass of water is sitting here waiting for him. Our next speaker is going to bring a different dimension. We're very pleased to have Professor Jason Chua here, who's the head of the Academic Law Department, Professor of Commercial and Maritime Law, City University in London, and we're delighted that he's going to be here to speak to us this morning.
Sorry, I have to leave because I have to go back to Lagos tonight. I came yesterday. It's to show how important it is because if the master does not appear here, it must send the wrong signal that we are not serious about the school. That's not the issue. I came all the way here last night and I'm going back tonight. So I got to leave now because I got to go back and pack my things and head to the airport. So thank you very much. And I hope the next alumni should be held in Nigeria, right?
Yes.
Eh? I'm not hearing yes, everybody. So you cannot solve Nigerian problem in London. You've tried it from here. When I was invited, the first question I asked, why are you holding this in here? And somebody explained, so look, they want to have international exposure to give the confidence. You've done that. I expect that you should bring all the expatriates who are already here back to Lagos.
Yes.
No, and we'll guarantee that we will support you. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's always challenging and difficult, I think, to follow on from a very riveting and exciting debate as that was. And it was very much an eye-opener for me. And I have to say thank you very much for that experience. Now, my name is Jason Chua, and my area is maritime law and policy. My research is very much into, at the moment, it's looking at sustainability in maritime law. Now, what I want to do today, and as I say, when you have an academic in the midst of, you guys who are really at the co-face of the industry, you'll be able to quote to me, incidents and numbers and things like that, and all I could say is, oh yeah, that's very, very interesting. Now, I promise you that I'll try to take on the mantle of my predecessors and be as real as possible, so that what I talk about today is not going to be something totally abstract, okay? Now, I will do my best to stick to that agenda or that game plan. So the structure of my little talk today, and I shall do my very best also to stick to about 25 minutes to give ample time for the next speaker, as well as some time for question and answers, and of course time for lunch. Right, now I'm going to start off by talking a little, first of all, about why it is important to think about policy, and what do we mean when we talk about policy. I've heard a lot today about training, health and safety, workers' rights, workers' conditions, and so on and so forth. Now, I want you perhaps to think about a very recent incident, and which happened literally over the last so many hours. Now, most of you will know that this morning you woke up to the news that there had been another sinking of a passenger ship in the Philippines. And with that, the loss of very many lives. Then immediately we think about safety, don't we? Yes? We think about safety. I mean, you guys are maritime experts, and you think, look, so what went wrong with that ship? What went wrong with that voyage? But I want you perhaps to ask yourself this question this morning. Do you think it was a failure of policy that we had such an incident in the Philippines? I want you to sweep aside the immediacy of ship safety and that sort of thing. I just want you to think a little bit further and think, could that have been a failure of policy? Okay? Now, the next word I want you to think about, and which I hope to spend a little bit of time talking about today, is the idea of sustainability. Now you see that over there. It talks about sustainable shipping. We talk about sustainability. Now when I talk to my students about sustainability, I often get this shrug. Well, we know what sustainability means. You know, it's a little bit like, you know, trying to describe an elephant. You know it when you see it. But being a lawyer, this is one of the weaknesses, I think, in my line of work, and that is if you are a lawyer, you start to think, well, actually, it's not enough to say, I know an elephant when I see an elephant. It's not enough to say, I know what sustainability is, simply from the feel of the word. I think we need to take it a little bit further than that. Why? Because it is absolutely impossible, and I put this to you, it is absolutely impossible to design policy, to think about policy, to think about strategies without actually understanding what we're talking about. So you want a sustainable maritime policy, but if you don't know what sustainability means, then it becomes a rather chaotic exercise. It's a little bit like sailing without your charts. I was having a chat with somebody from the Nigerian Port Authority earlier over tea, and I was commenting about, he told me that he used to, when he was a seaman, he used to sail to Singapore, and that's where my mum comes from. And I was saying to him how challenging it is to be a pilot in the Port of Singapore. Now, for those of you who have been to the Port of Singapore, you know how challenging it is. It's one of the most busy ports, but it's also a very, very efficient port. And the pilots are expected, they get punished, or at least they get performance managed, if they are unable to expedite the piloting of a vessel into that congested port. Now, but why am I talking about this issue of congestion? It goes back to what I mean by, yes, we can talk about sustainability, but if we don't actually know what it means, you are like a ship without a good pilot. You are caught up, we are caught up, I should say we are caught up with all the different imperatives in the maritime sector, from education to training to safety to security, and we want to do everything, don't we? Can we? Right, now, so these are some of the issues I want to talk about today. And the starting point of it is to understand that when we talk about the devising, the implementation of policy, we cannot simply be thinking about government and industry. I think we need to think about a slightly different word, and that word I put to you is the word governance. Governance is about a joint exercise. It is about you guys in the industry working with the academy, working with government, be a single entity or a single institutional exercise. So if you start to think about policy in terms of governance rather than in terms of government, then we see this as a shared exercise. We see this as a shared vision. So everything begins from this. So once we have established within ourselves this vision for a sustainable maritime policy, and I'm assuming that we are all on board, pardon the pun, then a starting point for any emerging economy has got to be not simply about the end that you're trying to get to, but actually about the starting point. What are the raw materials that you have? What are your resources? Now, when I talk about resources, I don't simply mean your economic resources, and I don't mean the country's natural resources alone. I actually mean your institutional and systemic resources. Now, if you want a policy, you don't just want a dream. Policy is not simply aspiration. Policy has got to be about a plan of action. It is about doing something, not just dreaming it up. Therefore, you do need to have the right sort of institutions, the right sort of systems, and the right sort of processes that will help you get there. So, a lot of today's presentation is pivoted on the fact that there must be in existence certain systems that we are all privy to, certain establishments, certain institutions and frameworks that we already have. Otherwise, you can talk big, but you won't be able to achieve much. And if I were to give you an example of where such a challenge might be, now some of you may or may not know that the European Union has got an integrated maritime policy. It sounds very good and big. It's not just a maritime policy, but it's an integrated one. But it is an extremely ambitious program, and it is finding it quite difficult to see itself being discharged by the different member states. But why is that? Well, it's because if you think about the European Union, in order for the European Union to achieve anything, it needs to have consensus. It needs to have the institutions in each and every individual member country to do its bit to help it get that. That is not easy to achieve. It doesn't have direct enforcement authorities, for example. So you can talk about maritime safety, but it has no maritime safety agency that can actually go and do the work. Everything is largely dependent on national bodies. So far, so good. I hope you followed what I'm trying to get at. So we do need, therefore, to have these systems in place. Now, having achieved a position, now, of course, I'm not saying that you need to have everything in place. All I'm saying is that you need to have at least some basic structures in place. But the second dimension to what we're talking about is perhaps even more challenging. And it is about our own ideological and political imperatives. You all were a little bit agitated earlier. Politicians say, and their patience, I think, is quite important. And for emerging economies, I think the tussle or the tension has always been deciding what we understand to be free market economy. Today, a word that has been bandied about a bit has been the word cabotage. Now, you will, of course, not be insensitive to the fact that cabotage is a dirty word in the European Union, for example. The Jones Act in the US, for example, is very keen to remove things like cabotage. On the other hand, with emerging economies, there is a need to protect home labour. So cabotage is not seen as a dirty word. But immediately this takes us into a big debate, doesn't it? A big ideological debate, the free market debate. And sometimes there's a lot of groping in the dark, I mean quite understandably, because we ourselves are not quite sure where we stand in this scheme of things. On the one hand, we want to say we want to believe in the market, we want to say we believe in competition, we want to believe in the principles of the World Trade Organization, but on the other hand, you are having to deal with people whose jobs are being threatened, whose jobs need protection, whose interests need to be cultivated. So it's a huge tension. I can't offer us any solutions there, but I think one has to be realistic about the ideological debate and the ideological standpoint. Then recognizing the limits of the law. The law can only achieve so much. The law does not mean enforcement. You can have the best cabotage law, for example. You can have the best maritime safety-looking legislation, for example. But if it is not properly implemented, or if it is not properly enforced, then what's the point of having policy that takes you no further? Recognizing the limits of territory and geography. Now again, from some of the debates that have gone on this morning, you have alluded to competition, haven't you? You've alluded to regional competition. You've alluded to people going elsewhere to be trained. You've alluded to people using different ports from different countries. And so competition becomes quite a vexed issue. So again, when you want to draw up a maritime policy, or when you are trying to redesign or refocus your maritime policy, it is very easy to simply think within the context of your own boundaries, because that is the limit of your jurisdiction, so to say. However, let's not be blind to the fact that there is a regional dimension, there's a regional angle to all this. So what you do in your own domain could have implications for the users of your ports, the users of your ships, the users of your supply chain. And in turn, this could actually result in either they going somewhere else or staying with you. So thinking about the limits of territory and geography, I think is quite important. Take Malaysia, for example. Malaysia had an integrated maritime policy for the last 25 years. Some of us hold Malaysia ports up as a paradigm. We even send our young people out there to be trained, don't we? But at the same time, for a long time, ships were refusing to use or were declining to use Port Klang, which of course is in Malaysia, in preference to Singapore. Why was that? Was that a failure of policy? Was that a challenge for policy? And I suggest to you that it was. So in its haste to build its own infrastructure, things were not properly looked at. There was a huge debacle over corruption, for example. So the issue of confidence in the port itself was extremely acute. So these are important considerations. Recognizing cultural and business norms. Now, when it comes to policy making, sometimes it is easy to forget that you are dealing with the people dimension. You're dealing with the people factor. And we take maritime education, for instance. The EU Task Force for Maritime Labour and Competition published a report in 2011 saying that, oh, we need to build up the maritime education sector, and we need to invest in it, we need to invest in R&D, and so on and so forth. All sounds very good. But then, one of the challenges we have in Europe is how we perceive maritime education. You raised the whole issue earlier about, is it something to be taught at universities, for example? So within Europe, there is this debate going on about maritime education being entirely vocational and therefore is to be taught by maritime colleges rather than by, say, universities. And immediately then that creates this impression that maybe maritime education is not as good as, or is not as commendable as, or not as preferred to in university education, for example. So suddenly parents start to think, well, you know, shall I send my kid to do a seafarer's course rather than to send them to universities? So that is a cultural thing. There is a cultural issue. And so one has therefore got to factor that in. So it's not a case of simply, yes, we need to educate more people and therefore let's build more colleges. It is a case of how is that educational experience, how is that educational project perceived by the users, both domestically and internationally. Right, now lastly, it's also the question about who does what. And sometimes, this morning there was an item on the radio about how companies in the past, and to today as well, have always preferred the alpha male. You know, the really outspoken man to be at the helm. They see that person as having the vision to do the job. But research is beginning to show that actually sometimes the beta man can actually do as good a job, if not better. So, when it comes to policy making and implementation, we need to think about the people involved. We need to think about the policy makers. And we talk about the policy maker, but who are they? Are they your politicians? No, I suggest that they should